Hi, everyone. I am so excited to be here. I am here with Elliott, and we are from Team Performance Institute. And we're going to talk all about tips and tricks for giving and receiving feedback, which we know is a topic that we talk about a lot with our clients, and it can be challenging. So the first question I'm going to throw to Elliott, who I'll have introduce himself in a second, is what makes giving and receiving feedback so challenging for people, in your opinion, in your experience?
Yeah, thanks, Alyssa. This is one of those topics where we never get to peek behind the curtain. Therefore, we never really get to have this modeled to us. So imagine yourself, new manager, imagine yourself a seasoned manager, and you have a tough conversation that has to be had in order to move something forward. And you think to yourself, how do I do it? And you've never seen it before. You know, I think that's why people really struggle with it. So how do we get them to a place where they can at least prepare? And that's hopefully what we'll dive into today.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And yeah, I think in my experience too, it's always that or part of it is that piece of the unknown, right? Like you don't know what the other person's going to say. You may not know how they're going to react if you're the deliverer of the feedback. So helping quell some of that too for people and help give them kind of a plan and a process and a way to think about it, I think is going to be really helpful as we dive more into that. So before we do that, maybe just tell us a little bit about yourself, Elliott. Just a kind of a quick intro to who you are and how you help folks.
Yeah, I've been facilitating and in the world of leadership development for 20 plus years. I started as a kid, out on ropes courses, taking executives 30 feet in the air, and I've since started to really shift that more towards the one-on-one coaching space and just kind of facilitating rooms, helping folks learn these trips and learn these tricks and tools in order to have impact. You just mentioned like that whole feeling of wanting to show up well. And I tell folks all the time, I said, look, we oftentimes judge ourselves based on the intentions we have. So when we're given feedback, we're like, yeah, I nailed it, right? Because I intended for them to receive it well. And what we realize and what these tools will help you with is that others tend to judge us based on the impact we have on them. And those two things don't always mix and those two things don't always match unless we're having real conversations around them. So getting prepared and really being in that right spot to sit down confidently, calmly, and deliver both reinforcement feedback for stuff that people are doing really well as opportunity feedback where they can improve, where they can kind of take that next step in their journey is really our job as a leader. And if we can grow people in that way, all of a sudden we can build trust and we can kind of engage in a new light that hopefully allows us to just continue this process and make it repeatable, which is where we really hit the sweet spot of matching that intent, matching that impact.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Yeah, that's great. And I love two things I just want to highlight that you said about giving feedback around what people are doing well and what is really positive reinforcing feedback. And then also this idea of opportunity feedback, which are two really great ways to think about that. And that opportunity feedback around, hey, here are some areas of growth or things that I've noticed, or that's when you're starting to share the experiences that you want the person to maybe have a different perspective on. So I love that you broke that into those two components, because I think sometimes we think about feedback, we think about it's like always negative or it's always going to be a critique of some sort, which is not the case. And we want to make sure we have that other side of things too.
So, yeah, and there's a piece there too, Alyssa, just to kind of jump in, right? The old school way of kind of thinking about feedback is that we have negative and positive feedback. And you'll notice I used different language, reinforcement and opportunity, right? When we think about a safe place to sit down with somebody, if hey, I got this negative feedback I need to give you, we put them on edge. We already put them on the defensive versus, hey, it's opportunity. And I can give somebody the choice around, do you want to take it and receive it? And if you do, what are you going to do with it? How can you use it to better yourself? So I do a lot of work with folks, even around language when it comes to feedback, that it matters. And those folks that live in that old school kind of space of negative and positive, it's a tough transition. I just want to encourage folks out there. practice new language, because language does matter,
Mhm.
especially in the safe workspaces we're trying to create today.
For sure. Absolutely. Well said. And let's stay on just for a second this kind of topic of the old school style. And one of the things I hear from clients a bit that I'd love for you to comment on is this kind of old school model of the like sandwich style of
Mm,
feedback, right? Where you're like, say something
mm,
positive and then you give like a bit of a critique and then you say something positive again, or, however the language may be now, but that's this kind of style, tried and true kind of old school model of giving feedback. And I think that's the one that still permeates people's thinking. So share with us your thoughts on that and how you use that or toss it or whatever.
Yeah, I love that you kind of put it in that old school category, right? Because it is something that people have learned, and it's been taught for years out there of like, tell somebody something good and then fill in like what you really want to tell them, and then backfill it with something that's really good again. And honestly, my opinion on that, it oftentimes leaves people really confused. It oftentimes leaves people in a place of like, they receive this feedback and they walk away from it going, okay, Elliott sat down with me and he said this really nice thing. And then he gave me this piece of feedback. And then he told me I'm doing a great job. And they may not always implement whatever feedback
Mhm.
you've been giving them versus just changing the conversation or paying attention to how often you're delivering this kind of information. Something I oftentimes encourage, especially in my executive coaching, is that when you're meeting one on one, it should be a two-way dialogue. You can show
Mhm.
up and ask somebody, hey, Alyssa, where do you feel? I'm a big baseball fan. Where did you feel like you knocked it out of the park since we last met?
Mhm.
Right? And that conversation can build the wins. It can build that positive reinforcement, and you can deliver that feedback in the space. And then you can open up dialogue to say, where have you struggled? Where
Mhm.
has there been opportunity? And all of a sudden, you're in a different conversation and you've transitioned really well. The other
Mhm.
piece is kind of a principle that oftentimes I teach to folks, and it's the 90-10 rule. Are you delivering feedback 90% of the time that's reinforcement, right? That quote unquote positive feedback? And are you delivering opportunity feedback 10% of the time? The reason for that is you can get really clear on feedback that's going to have impact. And if you're on that 10% of the time, it's going to feel like that's what you're talking about probably half the time. So it's just kind of a rule. It's not a hard and true, but instead of the proverbial sandwich method, I go by
Mhm.
the 90-10 rule, and I try and create space for dialogue to happen on a regular basis, recurring, that people know, oh, this is where I sit down with Elliott to give and receive feedback. And all of a sudden the environment can completely shift versus I come up to you one day and I say, hey, Alyssa, I need to talk to you. And you go, oh my gosh, psychological
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
warfare inside your brain going, what does he need? Oh, does he know what I did? Does he want to talk about that mistake that I had? And you come to my office and you sit down and I'm like, you're getting a raise, right? And you just spent an entire day and lost productivity and lost activity that's going to drive the business forward. So if you create space and you create time to actually sit down and have these conversations, you can change the game and you can just make it part of your routine and part of
Mhm.
your habit.
Yeah, I love that. And I want to just extend that with a question. So, for people who are thinking about what's the right cadence or frequency to meet to give just regular feedback conversations, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think we'll go old school first. Old
Mhm.
school is that we do either twice a year, middle of the year and end of year, and I think that's way too few. I don't
Mhm.
think it gives
Mhm.
people enough time to make changes, enough time to re-clarify goals. So for me, at minimum, I recommend to folks be meeting monthly, right?
Mhm.
Be meeting monthly, but you got to find a cadence that works for you. The sweet spot where I see it work best is biweekly.
Yeah.
So if you can sit down biweekly and dedicate time that you usually spend in a one-on-one to talking about how you're doing and using that space for growth, you'll find that over time, you're going to spend less and less talking about the details of the things that weren't done or that you expected to be
Mhm.
done. right? You're going to find less and less that people are coming to you going, hey, Elliott, I need that information that you have inside your head, because they're going to learn it and you're going to start teaching them, right? It's the whole teach a man to fish and they can eat for a lifetime type of a principle.
Yeah, I love that. And I have two questions for you that I think are going to be really helpful for folks. So you've kind of alluded to this a little bit, but I'd love if you could be a little more specific on what model or system or anything that you kind of give people as a way to follow when they need to give feedback.
Yeah, let's start with kind of the where this kind of got created from. There's a model out there. It's called the SBI model, and I've added an N to it. So in my head, again, sports fan, I hear the Sports Center, ba-da-da, ba-da-da, so the SBIN instead of ESPN. But SBIN, what it stands for, it's an acronym. S is for specific situations that you witness people in. B is for the behavior that you see that you want to give feedback on. I is for the impact that it either had on you, others, or the business. And N is for needs and next steps, right? So if I'm sitting down preparing my thoughts around, I have this meeting with Alyssa coming up, I can reflect on what are the specific situations that I want to call out. And I can be very aware of, am I spending all this time around opportunity and growth, or am I reinforcing? So I can pick and choose as a leader what that's going to look like. And when I sit down with you, I could say, hey, Alyssa, here was the situation. We were preparing for this call, right? Here was the behavior. I witnessed you really encourage me around what topics we might want to discuss today. All right. Here was the impact, right? For me, that made entering into this conversation so much easier. I felt prepared. I felt like we would have a great conversation and that people would be able to take away multiple things. So here's what I need, or next steps. Let's pause and have a conversation around how we do that more, right? What was it about yesterday's meeting in preparation for today that really allowed us to be in the spot? That's something we can do again. Take the same model and flip it on its head for opportunity feedback. Here's the situation. The other day, I saw you tossing boxes. Maybe you're a package handler out there, right? I saw you tossing boxes, and that behavior, I got to tell you, is unsafe, right? There's a warehouse full of people. The impact of that behavior is that it could hurt you and you throw your back out. It could hurt others. Maybe they're not walking, and maybe they're paying attention while they're walking. And I need to work with you on how can we get that not to happen again, right? So we can use this model in both those forms. But for a leader, what I've seen is when they actually sit down and they identify the situation and behavior, when they identify the impact that it's having on themselves, right, others around them, or the business, they enter into a conversation with a little bit more confidence, right? And when you have a little bit more confidence, you have your words, and you can sit down and share out what it is you're thinking and what it is you want to kind of pass on to this person as far as feedback goes, and enter into dialogue versus, this is a really uncomfortable conversation and I don't know how to talk about it. And the confusion sets in, and you go down a path that all of a sudden you're not talking about the topic that you really wanted to. You're talking about something else because you're just trying to backfill and regain the confidence around it. So SBIN, specific situation, behavior, impact to you, the organization, or others, and needs and next steps is the model that I use with folks to really drive change, drive preparation, and build that confidence.
What a great model. And I love your examples. They're super clear and tangible. And I think it's helpful to make this approachable so people can get out there and use it today, right? Like after hearing this or in the future. And my last question for you is from the receiving side. So let's say you have to go in to a meeting with your supervisor or a colleague or whomever, and you know you're going to be on the receiving end of feedback. How do you suggest people prepare to be in the right space for that?
Yeah, I think it's a mindset piece, right? And if you don't mind, I'm going to answer this with a story,
Hmm.
right? And this is a story from my personal life. I grew up in a very small town, learned the sport of hockey when I was in junior high on rollerblades, and decided I wanted to play on a team. So I asked my dad, Dad, can we drive 45 miles to a school that has a hockey team so that I can be a part of it? And he's like, son, yes, that would be great. I would be happy to do that. Dad, if you're watching, sorry, that's not your voice. I'm just being funny. But the point is, before my freshman year, I got to go to a hockey clinic and be on the ice with other guys that were going to try out for this team and the coaches. And it sat down and gave feedback to all of the individuals that were part of that camp. Now, very early on, I realized I wasn't like all the rest, right? There's that old song, like one of these things is not like the other. That was me. I was on the ice with all these guys with their all-star jerseys from the Pee Wee hockey they had played. And I've got my Detroit Red Wings jersey on. I've got my Play It Again sports equipment on, right? They look polished. I look kind of just shoveled together. I couldn't skate backwards. I couldn't shoot a wrist shot. My slap shot couldn't even get off the ice. So I knew and entered into the locker room when I sat down to receive feedback with an understanding of what my skills and capabilities were. And I think that's the piece that people really have to embrace is, are we putting a vision of ourselves that meets reality, right? When I entered in there, I sat down on literally a bucket and the coaches are on the benches and they rated the players a 1 through a 5. 1, you're going to make the varsity squad. 5, don't even try out for this team. And I sure as heck got a 5, right? They sat there and said, hey, Elliott, you're just not there. You'd probably have a lot more fun playing house hockey. If you try out, you're not going to make the team. We don't want to encourage you around something that you don't have the skills for. And I looked the coaches in the eye and I was like, awesome. I thank you, right? I received that feedback well. And I think that's a big piece too, is do we acknowledge it? So if somebody's delivering it to us, that thank you and offering what you heard is a big piece of it. I looked the coaches in the eye. Thank you. I understand that. I came to the school because I wanted to be part of the team. So I'm going to continue to try. I want that, right? I understand if I don't make this team, but I want to be a part of this team. So please reserve the water boy position for me if my skills don't improve. One thing led to the next. My junior year, I was part of that team that won the state hockey title in the state of Ohio. My senior year, right, I was on the varsity squad full time, made it back to the Frozen Four. My sophomore and junior year, I was the captain of our JV squad. Like, it just exploded. Now, mind you, I actually made the team, and I found out when I graduated that the coach had me and another guy that they hadn't made a decision on, and he flipped a coin. So I was heads or tails. I don't know which one. But the point is, along that journey, right, I got really good at practicing receiving feedback. Yeah. And my skills improved by it, right? I was aware of what I could not do, and I listened, and I worked with coaches. I didn't want to hit people. I love hitting people on the ice now, right? Who knew that would be something inside me? I get on the ice nowadays with some of the old guys here in Cincinnati, and I'm blasting, rocket shots off the crossbar just to see if I still got it, because it's a skill I learned and retained because somebody was kind enough to give me feedback and I was in a good space to receive it and would thank them and implement it as I went along. So I know that doesn't fully answer the question with a direct model, but I think that example is a good one to kind of hold on to and go, where am I in a good space to receive feedback and where am I not? And when I do receive feedback, how do I acknowledge it and implement it? Mm-hmm. And if I'm not doing that, I'm probably not receiving feedback well, and there's something else going on.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great story and memorable, and gives such a great example of how do you stay in that open and receptive mode when you're getting feedback. And, I just want to thank you to Elliott for for being here, for sharing so many great nuggets, and for sharing your wisdom. Thank you so much. And I hope you all who are listening got some great tips and tricks out of this. So stay tuned for next month when we'll hear from another coach. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Alyssa.